All right, welcome to our sort of intro to Photoshop. If you've worked in Photoshop before, some of this might be a little bit redundant going over file setup and things like that, but hopefully you'll get something new out of it. So first part of this is going to be going over file setup, then we're going to go over non-destructive editing and the sort of way around Photoshop's different tools, such as selection and how to get that done. And then we'll progress from there tomorrow, talking about blend modes and different layer styles. So we'll get started. I'm going to pause music when I'm talking about something really serious, but otherwise I'll have some music on in the background just so that when I'm working on things that require moments of silence, it will not be painfully boring for you guys. But for the moment, we'll pause. So in Photoshop's interface here and what we're looking at, if it's your first time opening it, will probably not have all of this going on in here. Other work, other images that you've edited, especially, nothing will be saved to the cloud and you won't see anything here if you've never opened it before. So we're going to go to a new file. I'm going to set up our file exactly as you need to for the assignment, but we'll talk about a couple different things while we're going through that file setup. So again, if you've never worked in Photoshop before, this is your first time opening it, you will not see all these different file sizes here. These are just previous sizes or dimensions that I've been working in under recent. Otherwise, there are standard ones under photo, print, art and illustration, etc. I tend to not work off of these base things too because it's a preset. You're not going to have the most control over all these different things. I think it's good to manually set up your files so you know exactly what you're getting every time. So if there's a mistake, it's because you made the mistake. It's not because you just clicked the wrong thing in the program, basically. And then you also know what is going on and how to fix it. So under this new file that we're creating, you can go ahead and name it right here, right now. If I wanted to, I could name it first or last name, first name, collage 1, if I wanted to. And then we'll go from there. Width and height, your dimensions for this 8.5 by 11. Um, you can make it 11 by 8.5 if you want it to be horizontal composition instead of vertical. You can also flip the alignment here and it will do that adjusting for you. Um, and then this drop-down menu, when you click it, is going to have all of your different possible units of measurement that you can pick from. So there are certain times where you might not want to be working in inches, you might want to be working in pixels. You will know if those situations arise. For now, we're working in inches. I think that is kind of the neatest dimension to, or like, we all know what inches are, so it's the easiest translation. So I'm going to select inches here and not change it. Under resolution, this is where you would manually set your resolution. You could type in 72, you could type in 122, you could type in 500 if you wanted, or 1500, I guess. For us, we're going to do 300. Even though we are not working in a print format, we are not going to be printing these. I always like to set up my file with the assumption that you don't know what the final end result could be. Maybe you want to print something down the road. If I were to set this to 72 and then decide months later, ooh, I really like this, I want to print it, um, I could certainly try, but it's going to look bad. So if I just automatically set it to 300 and then need to downgrade it to 72 later, easy peasy. It's not going to impact the file in any way. If I set it to 72 and wanted to up it to 300, it's going to downgrade that file size because we are working with a raster-based image. It is not translatable. It is not infinitely scalable. Um, for this application here, your color modes. Color modes were not talked about in our digital images presentation, so I will give a quick run through of what all of these mean. Bitmap, grayscale, RGB color, CMYK, lab color. You don't need to worry about bitmap and you don't need to worry about lab color. Um, Grayscale is going to be if you have no color data in your image, or you're going to remove all the color data in your image. So if I were to select grayscale for this document, I would not be able to use any color unless I manually switched it to something else in progress on that file. So that also means that if you import an image or you're working on some sort of file type that had color, it was RGB, and then midway through that file you switch it to grayscale color, you will lose all that image color data and you will not be able to get it back even after you switch back to RGB because it was deleted, basically. We are going to work in RGB today. RGB is going to be your web-based colors. And CMYK is going to be your printer colors. So if you're ever working on a project that you know you're going to print, you want to set it to CMYK. If you are working in a project that you know is only ever going to stay on the web, you want to set it to RGB. The reason for this is that printers print off of specific ink colors. And so those would be cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So your CMYK. Whereas your computer monitor is going to process colors through red, green, and blue. Basically, just pick the color format that you know you're going to be working in. It is easy enough to flip between the two of them, but if you are flipping from RGB to CMYK, it will convert some of your brighter colors to be a little bit duller, just because that is how inks print. This tends to be, shocker, your reds, your greens, and your blues that are very, very, very bright do not translate well to CMYK. So if you're trying to go for like a Klein blue, that's super, super, super bright, almost hurts your eyes, kind of like dark blue. That's not going to translate to CMYK at all. It'll get kind of dulled to like a navy-ish color. And I'll show you what that looks like down the road on one of our future recordings. So we're going to set it to RGB for today. You don't need to worry about changing your bit dimensions or your pixels per inch or pixel per centimeter units here. Your background contents, you could pick a background color here, right now, if you wanted to, but all of these things are changeable in Photoshop once you open your file. I always just leave it to white. I've never found a problem with that. Advanced options here, you have color profiles. We don't need to worry about that. If you were printing things, you would, but you would also be informed of what your color profile would be, so don't worry about that. And then your pixel aspect ratio, I've never needed to change this a day in my life. So we are going to stick with square pixels, and then from there, you are just going to hit create. And then you have your file. I'm going to make this window as big as I possibly can for this. And we're going to restart my music because we're going to start getting into working things. So we have our general Photoshop layout here. This is a lot maybe to look at first. So we have our tools over here on the left, and we are going to have a toolbar up here on the very top. You know what? Actually, for your guys' sake, maybe I won't play music. Resuming, toolbar up top, we have our tools over on the left. The thing to know about Photoshop is that there are more tools than meets the eye, really. Anything, and it's helpful sometimes, but I do hate the hover over options here, so try to ignore those if you can. I think they're very distracting. When you see this little gray arrow in the bottom right-hand corner of any of these tools, that is going to mean that there are more tools underneath that tool. So if you click and hold on it, you're going to get extra tools. And this happens in every single Photoshop layout, no matter what. I like to work in a very particular workspace that I would suggest you guys switch to as well, so that we are all looking at the same thing. So to do that, go up to Window on your very top bar, go to Workspace, and then go to Essentials Default. As you swap through all of these, they're going to change what you're working with. So if I swapped to photography, you'll notice all the tools on the left are going to change. And that also means that I lose access or lose easy access to some things. So like my fill paint bucket, my paint bucket tool is now gone and very difficult to find. Or actually, it's down here, I suppose, but it's just moved. And there's a ton of like other things under here that Photoshop has deemed a little bit less useful to photography purposes, I suppose. So like all of them are crammed under one tool, which is really kind of awkward, I feel, unless you're used to using this. And it's just only active because that's the tool I was last using in Photoshop. So otherwise, the paint bucket tool like would be weirdly invisible, so to speak. So going to painting, then the paint bucket tool is front and center, as are all of these other things, but I've lost some of the photo editing tools, like different selection tools or healing tools that are now hidden again under this more option. So I'm just going to go Window, Workspace, Window, Workspace, Essentials Default. And that is how I prefer to work. The more you work in Photoshop, the more you are going to assess what you like and what you dislike, and what your preferences are for where tools are located and how you have things arranged. And you can change that at will once you get more comfortable, of course. Again, over here on the left, tools, top bar are going to be your standard file, saves, edit, image, layer, etc. We will talk about those as needed. And then on the right, you have all of these different kinds of panels that you can sort of customize at will. So as an example, patterns I don't use as much in Photoshop, so I can click and drag this out and then I can just get rid of it. If I know I'm not going to use gradients as much, I could click and drag that out and get rid of it. Or if I pull gradients up, I can drag it back into this panel, so I have easy access. A lot of these icons might not mean a lot to you at first. You will get used to what they look like. If you ever lose track of what something is, just hover over it with your cursor, and it will tell you what that is. So for your layers, paragraph styles, etc. Pardon me. So I'm going to have my layers panel open. I think that is the most necessary to have open at first in Photoshop, along with your properties panel that's right here. Properties, I'm actually going to click and pull up to the top over here so that it's really quite long. I'm going to remove paths over here, and I can also drag around and extend all of these so that I have, again, really just my optimal kind of layout. I don't like a lot of Photoshop's like automatic filters and adjustments, so I tend to close those out right from the get-go. It's good, as always with a lot of things in art, to learn how to do it the manual way before you rely on like a quicker version of the process, because you can't learn if you're relying on a quicker version of the process otherwise. So we're going to go through the manual way of things. If you find shortcuts, that's awesome. Use your shortcuts, but I'll teach you the manual stuff. Properties panel is going to change depending on what you've clicked on. And you'll see this happen as we move through a document as we get started. If you ever lose a panel like properties or layers or gradients or anything, just go up to window and then you can navigate through all of these and it will show you anything. So if I lost properties, I could just click on it and reactivate it and it would pop back up and I could drag it back into place. Same thing, for example, history panel, or it will pop up and show you where it is on your navigation over here. So the thing we're going to talk about today, first and foremost, aside from these tools, is going to be non-destructive editing and how to start using your layers. Layers are the bread and butter of Photoshop. You have to use layers. Photoshop sometimes looks a little bit crazy when you amass more and more and more layers, but you kind of just have to get used to it. It is the necessary evil of this. Um, Also, if you hear like weird sort of like a clap or some sort of like rustling sound occasionally, I talk with my hands a lot, even if there's not people to see it. So I apologize for that. So layers panel over here is going to be these two little stacked squares. And there's a couple things to know how to do with layers. So I'm just going to, as an example, create two shapes. We'll just make a circle, and then we will change our color and make some sort of square. And I'm going to just fill, whoop, I'm just going to fill this with a different color. So we have our circle and our square, or rectangle, I suppose. Ellipse and rectangle for being proper. So in the layers panel here, it works exactly as you would think for like the layers of a cake. Whatever is going to be on top is going to be the most visible, and whatever is underneath is going to be hidden. If you're someone who also knows like traditional cell animation, maybe you're into anime or like Studio Ghibli films or traditional 2D cartoons like old school. Back in the 90s, cell animation was done by taking transparent sheets of like acetate or mylar, which is basically like a see-through thin sheet of plastic, and you would draw or paint on top of that thin sheet of plastic one frame of that animation, and then you would take another sheet and lay it on top and use the bottom layer for reference, and then you would keep adding onto layer by layer by layer so that you would get your frames. So this works in the same way. I have a background layer here that I can hide or show with that little eyeball in this panel. So click to make it go away and click to reveal it again. I have my ellipse layer on top of that background and the rectangle sitting on top of that. Again, I can hide and reveal these layers with that little eyeball tool. I also have the option to lock a layer so that I can't move it, even if I tried. If I unlock this, if I click on it, this is movable. Same thing with this one. If I click on this, it's going to hop to that layer. So that can be great, but that can also be really quite annoying if you have a lot of different things going on. Or if you have, say, like a color layer on top of everything else, but the opacity is down so you can see through it. If you don't lock that layer, you're going to be constantly moving it. It's going to get really annoying really quickly. So the locks are great. You have an alpha lock right here, which is essentially going to lock a layer to just its pixels that are present. So that means I can go over here, change my color to some sort of crazy green, go to my brush, and then with this layer selected, I could paint just on only the pixels of that layer, if that makes sense. So that's alpha lock. Um, I'm a shortcut person. I'm going to probably be using a lot of shortcuts, but I'll try to point out what I'm using as I'm using them. So that disappearance of that green brush stroke was just me hitting Command Z for undo. If you're not a shortcut person, you can go up to Edit, and then you have your undos and redos up here. Otherwise, when we're talking about layers, if I wanted to rearrange these layers and have this circle visible above this red square, I would need to manually reorder the layers. It is not enough for me to click on this circle and try to like move it on top of this. That's not going to work. I would have to go into my layers panel, click my circle layer, ellipse layer, and drag it on top of this rectangle. And that is how I rearrange those elements to make things visible like that. You also have the opportunity to adjust things like opacity. So my opacity slider, I can drag and make this ellipse more see-through or more opaque. So as this number decreases, it becomes more transparent. As it increases, it becomes less transparent. And then same thing with my background here. This background layer starts off as locked always. And that's because when we were setting up this file, we set it up with that white background. But like I said, you can keep changing things all the way through your Photoshop files. If I don't want this to be a white locked layer anymore, I will just double click this. It's going to ask me to name it. Name it whatever you want. Layer 0 is fine. And that is how I could go in and change colors or make it an image or what have you. So that is the general run through of your layers panel. There are a bunch of other ways to handle layers. You can select multiple layers by holding down Shift. So I'll click on my rectangle layer, hold down Shift, select this ellipse, and now both of them are selected and I can move them together. I can also use that to group layers. So you have this little folder icon down here. If I hover over it, it's going to say create new group. I can group them and now they're neatly in a file together. Great for organizational purposes. Great if you're overwhelmed by the amount of layers you're having and would like to make it a little bit more clean and concise looking. I can also, because if you're a shortcut person, you can also control click on this and then just hit new group. And that's going to let you group these layers together and then drag them into that group. Everybody has their own methods, depends on what you like to do. And again, just hitting Command Z for that undo there. There are also the opportunities to create new layers through this little shortcut button down here, or you can go to Layer, New Layer, or you can control click on the layer panel. Boop, new layer. You have the opportunity also to duplicate layers or delete layers here, but just as with these little icons, you can do that here as well. So if I wanted to delete this ellipse, I could drag this down to the trash file, or with it selected, I could just hit trash, and then it's going to ask me if I want to delete this layer. Hit yes. I can also duplicate layers with a little shortcut. Instead of control clicking and hitting duplicate, I can just take this and drag it to that plus, and it's going to duplicate that layer for me. So really excellent sort of shortcuts. Everyone has their own preference again. So I'm just going to click these and then just delete them. And we can get started on our photo editing. So your first project is a collage. You're going to need photos to work with. I'm going to pull in a couple demo photos to be working with. And the first issue to really tackle with collaging is how to remove the background of something. When we're thinking of a traditional collage, you'd be taking things like newspapers or magazines or printouts and cutting things out from their background so you can glue them down onto a separate sheet or canvas or something. So how do we do that digitally? And there's a couple ways to do it. So I'm going to open up apparently my whole computer. I'm going to go to my desktop and open up my demo folder here. And say this was your folder for all the photos you had gathered. I cannot suggest enough trying to stay organized when you're working with digital art. I would highly recommend creating a folder for all the assets you are working on per project, assets being images or text or whatever. It is so easy to lose track of things and then not know where you put them and not know if you mess up the file or have to restart. It's just such a mess having to go hunt down things. It takes so much time. So I can't recommend enough putting things in a folder. Sorry for my hiccup. So I have my glorious photo of our pears here. I'm going to take this resolution horrible, but it's fine. I don't care. Um, I'm going to take this photo of these pears and I'm going to take it and drag it into Photoshop. You can import photos, you can place photos. There's a bunch of different ways. I just like the drag in method. It's easy. I'm just going to drag it in. Once I get back in Photoshop, it might spin for a little bit. Now my photo's in there. There's one other step I have to do, otherwise I won't be able to click or do anything really, and you'll have to hit that little check mark to place that photo, hit return, etc. If you just go and select a tool like I just did, it'll automatically place it for you. But that would also be where, if I undo it and go back, where you could transform this photo if you wanted to from the get-go. You do not need to worry about transforming it perfectly the first time. And the important thing to note is that whatever size it drops it in automatically is going to be the innate size of the photo. So if I were to drag this out like that, that would be upscaling it and the quality might degrade. Dragging it smaller, totally fine. So from here, I'm going to hit check. And now I have this photo that I can work with. Couple things to note. Over here, there's this little icon in the bottom right-hand corner on my layers panel. It says it's a smart object. Smart objects are great. We want to be working with smart objects a lot. What smart objects are going to let us do is it's going to let us use some of the best filters in Photoshop, some of the best editing capabilities. Smart objects are also great in case you want to edit a photo outside of the file that you're working on. So if I double click this icon, it's going to pop up a whole different file. And whatever I do to this file, if I hit save, it will update over in this main one. So it's basically like a container. You don't have to work in it that way though if you don't want to. So what we're going to talk about is how to isolate things from the background. And the most important point to make is that we'll be using non-destructive editing. If you've heard the term non-destructive editing before, it is probably one of the most crucial things to start learning in Photoshop really early on, just because it's going to save you a lot of time and hassle, and it's technically the proper, with heavy air quotes, way to be doing things. I think the best way to talk about non-destructive editing is to demonstrate what destructive editing would be first. To do that, a smart object is technically not a image I can just like take an eraser to at first. So I'm going to rasterize this image first and foremost. I'm going to control click just for the purposes of this demo. You guys don't need to do this step. This is just for as an example. So I'm going to go to rasterize layer down here after control clicking on the layer. If I were doing destructive editing and I wanted to remove this from the background, I would just start taking an eraser to this and I would cut this out. Or I would take one of my selection tools over here that we'll go over in a minute, and I will quick select things. And I will just start deleting stuff. Why would that be destructive, you might ask? And that is going to be because we are just deleting image data. The problem with destructive editing is that you only have so many undos. So if I erase this, I just take an eraser through it twice, 3 times, 4 times. And then I think for a second and I'm like, oh shoot, I don't want to do that. Undo, undo. I can undo that. I have 5 steps in my undos. The problem is Photoshop only logs a certain amount of undos. And so if you've been working on a file for forever, maybe an hour even, and you erase something like this, or you erase a crucial part of this, like the center of one of your pairs, and then you go to your history panel, which is going to be how you can see every step you've taken in this. Oop, and I'll lengthen this. Every step I've taken in this file so far, I can see and navigate through to. So I can go back to the circle and the square. I can go back to when this file was just open, or I can hop all the way back to my eraser. Um, it only logs a certain amount of these. So if I were to keep working in this file, keep working in this file, say even if I were just minimizing and showing this layer, or just hiding and showing the background a bunch of times, and I'm just going to do this for demonstration purposes. I'm hiding and showing it, I'm hiding and showing it. It is logging every single one of those clicks in history. And really quickly, as I keep doing this, you'll see it's going to nudge up that point where I erase something more and more and more. It's only going to take a couple more for me to lose that entirely. And this is as many undos as I have in this file. So now if I wanted to undo and get that part of that pair back, because I'm like, oops, I erased this, but I really want that back, I couldn't do that. I would have to fully start over with that photo. I would have to go back in, I would have to delete this layer, and I would have to fully re-import that whole image again because it's destructive editing. I'm deleting that image data. I cannot get it back. And you might think that doesn't matter, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have a perfect plan and you execute it and you don't need to like really do a ton of undoing, or you know exactly what you want to erase and you don't need to backtrack. But 9 times out of 10, you'll want to get something back, or you'll want to clean something up, or you'll want the option to do that, and that's why we need to employ non-destructive editing. So the way to do non-destructive editing is to use layer masks. Layer masks might seem a little complicated at first, but I think once they click, they're the best thing to use in Photoshop. They are so flexible, and they let you do a ton of different fun things. So to do layer masking, first we're going to talk about our selection tools. Think about selection tools as the path that your scissors would cut on paper, or at least if you're translating it to an analog mindset, which is what I tend to do. So if we're working on in that same window space, workspace essentials, I'm going to go over here. The first tool underneath should be our marquee tools. Again, there's a ton of tools hidden under this. I'm going to start with the first one, rectangular marquee, and on our layer, pair layer, with that clicked and active, I'm just going to drag out a marquee. This is really self-explanatory. Actually, maybe I am going to rasterize. Oops, rasterize this layer first here. So with that marquee and my rasterized layer active, now this is going to function as a selection that is movable, etc. Undo that. The shortcut to deselect really quickly without having to go up to select to deselect is going to be Command D. Next tool is going to be your elliptical marquee tool. Again, you just click and drag out, and then you have an ellipse or circular selection. If you want these to maintain proportions, or again, like be a perfect circle, you'll notice I can drag this out to an oval. I'm going to hold down Shift, and it's going to snap to a perfect circle. So whenever it snaps, that's me pressing Shift. That's going to apply to all of your different shape tools or marquee tools that have dimensions like that. You can make it a perfect circle, perfect square, whatever, by holding down Shift. Deselect again. Also underneath this is a single row marquee and a single column marquee. Hyper specific scenarios for those. I don't really use them, but you can if you want to. I'm going to zoom out. If you're using a trackpad computer, you can just pinch with your fingers and like pull open to zoom in or out and navigate that window. Again, 2-finger sort of slide or pan is going to move that around. Next tool down is going to be your different lasso tools. I'm ignoring selection brush because there's one that I prefer to that. So lasso tool. This is going to let you free form with your trackpad drag around a selection for this. Obviously, this tool is going to be as good as you are with a trackpad. If you have a pen tablet, you know, like where you can draw that out with an actual like nice looking pen cursor instead, works wonders, but trackpads are notoriously hard. So, but it's also great for just like quickly selecting an area. So if I was just kind of haphazardly selecting something, it's really excellent for that. Clicking and holding, the next tool down is going to be the polygonal lasso tool. This is excellent for that like actual scissor kind of like slapdash cutout look. I love the polygonal lasso tool. I think it just looks like, I don't know, I think it looks fun. This is just done by clicking. I'm not clicking and dragging. I'm just like, I'm not holding anything down right now. I'm just clicking to place a point, and then it will, your cursor, wherever you like move your cursor to, it will follow. You do have to manually close this one. Otherwise, if you just hit return, it's going to like auto close it for you. So you would have to like fully click all the way around and close your circuit. Otherwise, it's going to get awkward. And then you have your magnetic lasso tool. I'm going to zoom way in for this one. Click and hold, magnetic lasso tool. This one is going to, you'll click to place your first point, and then it's going to look at the contrast between pixels and automatically snap to what it perceives to be an edge. So you'll notice my hands are completely off my keyboard right now. I am not clicking and dragging for this. This is just a single finger, like moving my cursor on my trackpad. It is snapping pretty darn well to the edge of this. I can click and place a point for a sharp turn, but it's decent. This is not the most contrasty image, but it's decent at recognizing the difference between pixels in color and contrast here. And I'm pulling slightly away. I'm not perfectly tracing the edge of this. It's doing a fairly good job. But if I do go off course intentionally, it will, of course, like eventually follow that. If I bring it back on track, I can get it pretty good. So this would not work well if you don't have a contrasty image, if you have an image with really similar colors in it. Obviously, like I personally don't think this pear image is ultimately the right one to be using for this. Because there's not a lot of standout in this, except for maybe this section. It would do really well with this. So yeah, obviously I just traced manically all over this. I'm just gonna hit escape and cancel that out. Magnetic lasso tool and some of these other types of tools, you need to know like what the scenario is to be using them in. So contrasty image, difference in colors, sharp edges, that's perfect for this. Next tool down, my favorite selection tool personally, the quick selection tool. This one is going to work like a brush, like you are painting over the areas that you want selected or deselected. So what we're going to do here, and I love shortcuts for my brush tools, your brush size you can change using the brackets on your keyboard. So if I hit the left bracket, it's going to decrease the size. If I hit the right bracket, it's going to increase the size. And then up here on your top panel, you'll have your standard selection. You can add to the selection or subtract from the selection. So I'm just going to go standard, paint over this. Sometimes just a single click like that will be enough to recognize it. Works great with a really contrasty image, but it also, I don't know, I find like this one just works great with most images. This is the one that I like the most, but maybe I'm biased. And the nice thing is with all of these selection tools, you have these options again at the top where like this, if it gets some part that I don't like, I can go in and remove it. I can keep editing this until it does exactly what I want it to do. But that's also the beauty of non-destructive editing that we're about to demonstrate is this little section in here that's not part of the pair, as you can see, like right in here. Using masks, I can keep editing the selection even after I've already applied the mask. That's the non-destructive part of it. I still have all that image data. I can keep fussing with it. So that's going to be quick selection. I'm going to back out of this one really quickly so that we can show the other one. Magic wand tool. This is going to select color ranges. So if I want to select only the weird orange elements of this, I can go ahead and do that. If I want to select even more of the orange, I can keep getting it. Again, really hyper-specific scenarios in which you would want to be using this tool, but it has a time and a place. It's really excellent at what it does in that regard. So those are your sort of bread and butter selection tools. Obviously, there's other ones within this: object selection, selection brush, these are the ones that'll get you started. These are the ones you need to know the most, really. Play around with them. I think also I like using a lot of selection tools to create shapes. So if I wanted to create like a little, oops, not the magnetic one, sorry. If I wanted to use the polygonal lasso tool to create a little like explosion like shape around these pairs, this is just me clicking, and I'll demonstrate this later in one of our future Photoshop sessions. Like I can create and fill a shape out of that. Really great for collage styles, paper cutout styles, if you're into that kind of look. So we're going to talk about actually applying the mask now. So first step, you need a selection. That's why we had to go over the selection tools. I need a selection to make a mask. I can't make a mask without a selection. So I'm going to go back in with my quick selection tool, my favorite, and I'm going to select these pairs. It does not have to be perfect at first. In fact, it's probably better if it isn't perfect at first for demonstration purposes. So I'm actually going to leave this weird shadowed section in on this because I can demonstrate the mask properties best if something isn't flawless. So I have my selection. I have the selected part I want. Next step to making a mask is to check that what is going to be visible, or at least most of it, is correct at first. So we have this excellent little option down here. It looks like a rectangle with a circle marquee in it. Hover over it. It's going to say edit in quick mask mode, or you can just hit Q. And it is going to show or pop up this little sort of red interface here. And the red is showing whatever is going to be covered up by the mask. I like to think of masks or the mask tool in Photoshop quite literally. When you're wearing a mask, it's covering up a part of your face. When you're using a mask in Photoshop, it is covering up a part of an image or part of your layer. And so whatever is in red here is what's going to be covered up. Whatever is red is your mask. So looking at this, this is a great starting point. Again, I do not need to worry about it being perfect. So looking at the edges of this, parts missing here. It's weirdly chunky and jagged. I can go in after I go back out of quick mask mode, I remove Q. I can go to select and mask up here, and this is going to give me a couple different options where I can like smooth the edges of this. I can feather it, which is going to essentially like bring the radius out or in a couple pixels, so that you get more or less of a selection. I'm not going to feather it, but I will smooth it by a little bit. You can add contrast so the edges are sharper, shift edge, etc. All these different things you can do to alter your mask mode. Show edge. Some of these you might want to make sure your computer is like plugged in for. Um, I'll hit OK on this. And then you'll notice as I zoom in now, the edge of this is going to be much less like jagged and chunky, especially with the quick mask mode. It's still a little fussy, but again, I can keep going in, select and mask, and I can kind of fuss around with these settings until it does what I want it to do. But again, you don't have to be worried about it being perfect at first. So hitting Q, toggling quick mask on, great starting point. I'm going to go over to my layers menu here, and a very similar icon to this one is on the bottom panel, layer mask. I'm going to click this, and it's going to apply my mask for me. I will know I have a mask active when I have this separate sort of layer icon over here in only black and white. Layer masks will work in black and white. You can edit them in black and white. This is your mask, and this is your actual image layer. If I'm hiding and revealing it, that's going to hide and reveal the whole layer itself. So if I want to just hide the mask, I have to control click it and then just hit disable layer mask to see the full image again. And then again, control click it again, enable layer mask. And so I have this mask active. Why is this non-destructive? Well, the image data is still all here. So you'll notice when I hit disable, this whole image is still present. I can go back and hit enable. That lets me continue editing this mask, this image, without messing up the actual picture itself. So no matter what stage I'm at in my collage, in my design, poster, whatever, even if I make a mistake, I can fix it. Or even if I decide to change direction, that whole image is still there. I don't have to start over in that process. It is so nice. So because this layer mask is working in black and white, I can go back in and I can either create new selections, I can add fills, I can simply go in with my brush tool right here on the left, looks like a little paintbrush, and I can paint and change how this mask is behaving. So say I want to make this section that I left in kind of intentionally. I'm like, ooh, I want that gone. I can look at my mask here. I can see that the background, which is covered up, is covered in black, and the part that is revealed is in white. So over in my colors over here at the bottom, right here. This is your color picker. You can double click on this to pick colors to paint in. On masks, it's not going to matter because it's only in black and white. Or you can just reset your colors, white and black, right here. I'm going to, with my brush active and changing my size with black, I can go in and paint on this mask to hide some of that extra section of those pairs. Same thing up here, some of it's missing. I can switch with that little switch arrow, and I can reveal some of these pairs again. Um, yeah, so it's really great, really wonderful that way. If I was being like really fussy about editing this image and I maybe didn't clean up those edges with that select and mask tool at our selection stage, I can go back in, flip to black, and I can, with my trackpad, just kind of carefully, and obviously this is a trackpad, so forgive my shaky hands, but I can kind of clean up those edges so that they look smoother from afar. This also is going to work with any brush tool you have. So up here on your top panel, this little caret menu, you can select different types of brushes. So if I wanted it to be softer and not, whoop, softer and smaller, and then I could get like a sort of crisp looking edge without it being super hard, I can change that way. Or if I did want to, like, I don't know, for some reason, diffuse some sort of section of these pairs, I could do that with a gigantic soft brush. And now you'll notice my mask over here is edited too. Um, Same thing, if I wanted to bring back, and I'm just flipping my colors, you'll notice over here I'm flipping it without clicking anything by hitting X. I could bring back or hide a ton of this image just using my paintbrush. That also means I can do that using selection tools. So if I wanted to have part of this be revealed again. Revealed is going to be in white. I'm going to fill it. Now I can have an element of that background back. So that is masks. They're really wonderful. They're great to use. You can use this to create windows through things. So if I were to like go in with a hard brush, just click in this guy with black to hide some of it, and then go in and change my background color, I don't know, horrid little green, you can now see through that. If there was an image under here, you would be able to see the image through it. And it is something that you can move around, and the mask will move with your image. The other thing to sort of get you guys started is how to transform things. So I'm going to hide this background really quick. Anytime you see these checkerboards, that just means it's transparent. I can also just navigate back to making this white. Fill bucket is going to fill things, relatively self-explanatory there. Say I wanted to change and transform this. I have to make sure that I'm clicking between the two. So I have a mask. I want to make sure I'm clicking on the main layer over here. Otherwise, I'm going to transform the mask itself. If you're a shortcut person, you're going to be looking for Command T. That is going to let you free transform things. In Photoshop, if you hold down Shift while you free transform, it's going to let you warp and stretch stuff. If you're not holding down Shift, it's going to lock your proportions. If you don't like shortcuts, you are going to go up to Edit and then Free Transform right here. And that is going to let you, again, do that free transformation. Really great, easy way to start out in Photoshop. So same thing I'm going to do. I'm just going to grab some sort of little stock photo, transform it. This is going to be a lot easier to see if I have a background that's dark, so I'm just going to fill this with black. And then again, I want to get rid of this. I also want to bring back in the center of this pear for demonstration purposes. With white. So I'm going to drag over, maybe. I'm just using arrow keys to nudge it. I'm going to drag over this, and then I'm going to go in and just select this sticker and again, mask it out really quickly. There are super quick ways to do this. So again, I love my quick selection tool. I'm going to navigate to quick selection. I can also just hit select subject and see how this goes. Did a great job. If you have an image that has a really clear contrast between a thing and then a blank background, just hit select subject, toggle on your quick mask, and then mask it, and you're good to go. Super, super quick, super zippy. And now I've cut out that background and isolated it. Big sale on the pears. Add a couple more things. This is something I believe from Pinterest. Fruit stickers. I really love fruit stickers. If anyone's has the same weird niche interest as me, I'm going to transform this one to be relatively large. And I'm going to do a fair bit of editing to this file. I'll keep working in this same file for all of our demos. So to be honest, I'm not super worried about this being like maybe not the highest resolution because of what I'm going to do to it in a future demo. So I'm just going to hit return. And I want this specific Del Monte sticker. So I'm just going to go in. If I hit select subject, it's not going to get me just one of these. So I'm just going to go in with my quick selection tool and grab this pretty fast. And then again, hit Q, make sure it's getting what I want it to get. I can clean up the edges on this a little bit later. If it's irritating me enough, again, I can just go in with these plus and minus, remove selection, add to selection tools, and fix it. Check my mask before I make it with Q. The one thing to note for you guys, which I see happen a lot, is you cannot create a mask with this like quick mask preview active. If I do that right now, it's going to do nothing. And that's because the selection at this moment is technically not active and you need a selection to make that mask. So just make sure you are not trying to make a mask by hitting this while you're in this quick mask mode. So get out of it by hitting Q and then make your mask and then you're good to go. And so I have all these funky little fruit stickers. I'm going to hit Command T to transform it. And this is where I can also rotate this guy and sort of position things. And then I have a couple other files maybe that I'll add in some of these sparkles. Maybe I'll add in some text in just a little bit. And then I'll catch you guys in the next sort of demo video where we can start talking about like effects to add and layer blend modes and things like that, which is super fun. So for now, what I would suggest you guys start working on is thinking about what themes you want for your collage, what images you want to be working with. Hopefully it's images that you found for that sort of mini 10-point assignment we had on Wednesday. If not, totally okay. You do not have to use the images from that if you've gotten other ideas. And then I would start trying to cut them out and using the masking tools in Photoshop. The other thing that I'm going to leave you guys on is how to save your file. I know that sounds silly. Photoshop does not autosave, so do not assume it's going to autosave for you. It happens super frequently that students will lose all their work. It's never going to autosave. So I honestly would say the first thing you should do when you open your file is just save it and establish it. You can go up to File, Save, or you can hit Command S. And what you're going to do is name it, make sure it's saved in a place where you can find it. I'm going to put it in my demo file. You want to make sure you are saving it as a Photoshop file, not a PDF or any of these other things. You need it to still be workable. These are not workable. Photoshop. If it gives you the option to save it to the cloud or save it to your computer, personally, I would save it to your computer. There's certain file capabilities you can't use if you're saving it only to the cloud. If you're tight on space, save it to the cloud, it's fine. But just be aware of where you're saving it to so you know what you can and can't do with it. And then I'm going to hit save. This, don't worry about, just hit OK. Now your file's saved. Great, we can keep working in it. You will just double click that file to open it, and all of your layers will still be present and rearrangeable and reorderable for you. And so we can jump into talking about different layer blend modes, different ways to edit things, different ways to make a cool collage tomorrow. We'll get into all sorts of different fun stuff. So work on cutting out your images, work on navigating the program, establishing your files, selecting images. Send me any questions you might have, and we'll talk about those different topics tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Bye.